our next honoree is just the most amazing builder. Whenever I think I hear that, you know, that O'Shaughnessy poem, "We're the music makers, we're the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone, we build up the world's great cities," I think of Kevin Roche. He, and I will introduce him as soon as I find my notes. There we are. Okay. He is one of the finest modern architects of his generation. He has literally shaped the American landscape with his stunning, innovative buildings, including the Ford Foundation in New York, the skyscrapers of the UN Plaza, California's Oakland Museum, the Conference Centre on the banks of Dublin's Liffey, the massive Santaden headquarters in Spain, and the soaring glass Sheol Dome in Tokyo city centre. And he's worked on some of the most important renovations, most notably his ongoing work with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So Kevin attended Rockwell College, which is in Tipperary, and after that UCD, and after that he apprenticed with Michael Scott, who was Ireland's leading architect at the time. In 1948, he decided to pursue a postgraduate degree at the Illinois Institute of Technology, although Harvard and Yale also wanted him. His studies there were cut short due to financial troubles. Again, that old financial troubles. But he sought work. He moved to New York and sought work at the massive United Nations building. And this is just incredible. He got an office job as an office boy in the United Nations because he wanted to be in there. And of course, they didn't have any openings for architect. He hadn't planned on staying in America so long, but the opportunity presented itself when he heard that the famous Eero Saarinen, is that right, Kevin? Was looking for apprentices, and afterwards he became the firm's senior design associate in 1954. He worked on such projects as the St. Louis Arch, Washington, D.C.'s Jules International Airport, and the CBS headquarters in New York. He started his own firm in 1966 and has been the visionary behind such buildings as the Nations Bank Plaza, the tallest building in Atlanta, the Museum of Jewish Heritage in downtown Manhattan and its moving Holocaust Memorial, and New York University's Kimmel Center for University Life at NYU. And that's just a tiny little handful. But in this issue of the magazine, I hope you'll read Sheila Langan's wonderful interview with Kevin Roche, and we've put in as many of his buildings, but not enough of his beautiful, wonderful buildings in this issue. Kevin and his wife of 49 years, Jane Toohey, with whom he has 5 children and 13 grandchildren, live in Connecticut in an old house surrounded by trees. So would you please welcome our inductee, honoree, Kevin Roche.
Oh, dear me. I thought we'd never get to this point. I'm really quite overwhelmed and very grateful for this extraordinary honor and to be grouped with this very distinguished members of the community. In a way, I'm sort of an interloper because I didn't actually emigrate as such. I decided, I don't quite know why, to become an architect, and then after working in London and in Dublin, I decided to study with the best architect in the world, who was Mies van der Rohe at Illinois Institute of Technologies. And I went to the embassy or the consulate in Dublin to get my student pass, and when we were there, he said, "You want a green card?" And I didn't know what a green card was, and I said, "No, I don't think I need one of those." And he said, "Well, you might as well take one." He said, "I got lots of them." And so I took the green card and flew to Chicago, which took 2 days in those days. And one thing led to another, and it turns out I really did need the green card. A moment just to thank my wife Jane, who was fabulous, fabulous, fabulous person who gave up her career to create a family of 5 children and 12 grandchildren, all of whom are not here tonight, but just one, Eamon, our oldest boy. So thank you for that. Now, I grew up in a very, very small town in County Cork, and nobody, I don't know why, I was about 12 I decided I'd become an architect, but I don't know why, and nobody understood, because nobody had ever heard of an architect. And they say, well, why do you want to become an architect? And say, sure, now if you want to build something, there's Johnny over there, and he's a carpenter, and there's Paddy Mac down the road, and he's a mason, so he'd put a building together. What would you do? You'd just stand there waving your hands. So here I am some 70 or 80 years later waving my hands still. But in any case, I did pursue it. And it was mentioned that I went to Rockwell, and at night time in Rockwell, you could have 1 hour of study. I mean, after the study, you had 1 hour of your own time. So I decided one night to design a church. Well, of course, naturally it was a church, because all we knew about was churches and all that stuff. And I had this brilliant idea to create the church in the planned shape of a cross. And I was so excited. I mean, this extraordinary idea had hit me and everything. And when I drew it up and I showed him out, and he said, "You bloody Egypt." And he said, "Don't you know every church is the shape of a cross?" So those are, but anyway. So that's the beginning of, downhill. And then there was one other thing I wanted to say, which of course naturally now I've forgotten what it was. But just an aside, Morningdale mentioned the Jewish community, and I have to say that one of my proudest achievements was to work with that community to produce 2 Jewish museums in the city of New York. And why would they go to a little boy who grew up in a small town in the south of Ireland? They were really, and I got into that understanding the whole Jewish world, and it's quite extraordinary. And it brings me to the point of what I want to say about. There was one other thing in my school class. I designed a house, and in the center of the house I put a spiral stairs, beautiful spiral stairs, and I'd never seen spiral stairs like that. And the professor came along and he looked at it and he said, how would you get a coffin down that stairs? And it was kind of, in a way, an eye-opener, because, we think only in terms of being alive, but there is another period which comes along. And why, and you can put it in this term, while we're alive, what do we do that we can really pass on to the next generation? What do we do to create a great world, a great culture, and all of those things? And we should dedicate our lives more to that, and we should try to understand more. I've been working for the Metropolitan Museum for 43 years, and I've become involved in, Japanese, Chinese, Egyptian, Roman, all of these cultures. And you get into becoming involved, and you realize they were all people. They all had ideas. They all had great hopes. They all knew how to fight wars too, which is another problem. But they had these great expectations. And what can we do with our lives to really pass something worthwhile along to the next generation and to the generation beyond that? And it's very important to think in those terms. And in that regard, of course, America is a great hope for all of the immigrants who came here, and it filled all of their expectations and most of their expectations, and it's truly the greatest. Let us make it the great hope for the rest of the world. And with that, I will cease and desist. Thank you very much.